Good day. Welcome to another episode of the Culture Hour. Today I have an amazing guest. All of my guests are amazing, but she's got a little spot in my heart, and you're going to see why after you listen to her. But my name is Shelley Smith, the founder of the Culture Hour. My co-founder is out in the field today, Elizabeth Veliz. So we all say a big peace out and peace up to Elizabeth Veliz out in the field. But let's just dive in today and get started. I have a wonderful guest. Her name is Dr. Sarah Spradlin, and I love her to death. She's an amazing human being who's done amazing things, not only in her military service, and she'll tell you a little bit about that, but her mind is crazy amazing. Her ability to connect, which is why she is an emotional intelligence expert and has every credential and more. You're going to love her. You're going to love how she pulls the pieces of the puzzle together. I love working with her on a few of the various clients. And so today we're going to dive in with Sarah. But first, let's hear from the master herself. Sarah, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Hello. Good day, everybody. Shelley, thank you for having me on. A little bit about me. I served nearly 10 years as an active duty Marine Corps officer and started to have a slew of little humans running around, and the work-life balance and the parental guilt set in between deployments and our schedules, my husband and I. And so I transitioned off active duty, and I had a wonderful opportunity to serve there for nearly 4 years. And when we decided to call it a day, my husband retired, and we moved up to the Central Virginia area, where I started my own workforce development firm called Vitruvian Advantage, where we specialize in workforce development across the spectrum. However, what really sets us apart and makes us unique from the myriad of other management consulting and workforce development firms is that all of our services are grounded in the theory and, of course, more importantly, the practical application of emotional intelligence. And so I've been doing that for a while up here. I also teach for Central Michigan University and the graduate students up there in their workforce development program, their MSA program, succession management, coaching, mentoring, workforce development initiatives of that nature. Work for an organization called Mission 60, which is a wonderful opportunity. We've had a lot of fun experiences working with executives as well as professional athletes. And in terms of credentials that Shelley was referring to, I attended the Neuroscience of Leadership program at MIT. I hold a doctorate in business administration, specializing in industrial organizational psychology. I hold a master's in criminal justice, where I was specializing in narcotics investigations. I had a momentary time in my life where I had planned on joining the DEA. That didn't pan out. However, here I am. And my undergrad is my bachelor's degree is in psychology and leadership. And I've got these 4 amazing kids running around, so I do that that's my main job, and then the rest of that is my side job.
Wow, I told you guys her credentials are amazing, and she's an amazing human being who's been out there protecting our country and now protecting our minds against ourselves. So I've taken one of her assessments, and it's scary accurate, but I have to tell you, I learned so much. We think we know ourselves, but the reality is we may know ourselves, but we don't know what to do with ourselves. So being able to have, those type of assessments are really eye-opening, and it gets at the so what to it. So I love it. So Sarah, tell us what's been going on in your world. We were, talking a little bit before we started taping that you said you get a lot of phone calls and inquiries around resilience. I know that's a really broad topic, but why don't you just kind of dive in and tell us what are some of the main calls and requests, and how you dive in and, as you say, peel back the onions and kind of get at what it is that is really going on in an industry. And then I'll just do my thing and kind of layer in the culture talk as we go. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about some of those phone calls?
Wonderful. Thank you, Shelley. So resilience, absolutely. Resilience is a huge topic. I think it always has been, but more so nowadays, given, in the world we live in right now is unbelievably dynamic. And, the reality is with technological changes and innovations and changes in the economy, shifts in the political platforms, all of these changes in some form or fashion are impacting every organization, whether it be a major international Fortune 500 company, or whether it be this new startup for the entrepreneurs that we have all over the place right now, which is amazing. The interconnectivity of today's global market, really, I mean, it is so interconnected that it is not a question of if you will be influenced by change, but it's a question of when. And so given the notion that the only constant that we're really fighting, if you would, or managing, is change. So change being the only constant, that concept of resilience has really come to the forefront. You know, how do we establish resilience for our organization today, so that tomorrow, years to come, whatever our build plan is going to be, whatever our 7, 10, 20-year vision is, we're going to be able to maintain that competitive advantage regardless of the change that comes to us, and we can overcome throughout all those times of uncertainty. And so I think really that's why resilience is really at the forefront of a lot of what we're doing, both of us, in the field of management consulting and workforce development.
Is there something that people, I don't know. Do people actually recognize it as the lack of or the need for more resilience, or how do they describe it? Because I would tend to think that they probably don't even know it or recognize what the issue is.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And so I'm going to give you a tangible example that I've seen throughout the years. Organizations, as you know, are really trying to develop their unique culture, that positive, sustainable, resilient culture that they envision that's right for their organization. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, oftentimes, whether they're starting or whether they're doing a reassessment of their culture, you know, they're going to do some kind of internal survey question, find those gaps where they're strong, where they could improve. And when they do that, for example, I'm going to use effective communication or strategic communication as an example. Mm-hmm. And they'll do this survey, and they'll find that one of the things that may be lacking within their organization is that siloed effect and a lack of strategic communication within an organization. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes what will happen is the organization will bring in either internal or external experts, if you would, to do workforce development training initiatives that are specifically focused on improving that gap, that effective and strategic communication piece.
That one gap.
That's right. The one of however many they've identified. And so, you know, they spend this just an exorbitant amount of time and money and all other resources to focus on fixing that identified shortcoming, which is strategic communication. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, they're expecting that after this workforce development initiative and these training initiatives have been put in place, and the workforce has gone through the training, that at the end of the day, the workforce is going to be prepared and have the toolkit that they need in order to fill that gap, improve those changes. And they're now going...
Or fairy dust.
And they're now going to be able to mitigate all of the negative, implications, secondary and tertiary implications of the siloed communication or the lack of effective strategic communication. And what they realize is they say, hey, this didn't work, right? So we did all this communications training, and, you know, it didn't show the cost benefit ratio,
no impact.
Yeah. Why? Right. So we thought we made a change, we thought we were doing the right thing. And this isn't sustainable. It's not sustainable. It's not working. It's not really creating that foundation of resilience and enduring in terms of competitive advantage that we're looking for. Why? Well, what I say to them is, hey, the idea of bringing in, an expert to try to teach your workforce about effective communication is a great plan if you have already started by developing and training to a systemic foundational standard of competencies that, once you build that foundation of competencies, is now solid enough for you to add on to it a complex skill like strategic communication. Yeah. And that's where we start talking about emotional intelligence. When we talk about communication and we peel back that onion, we're talking about things like assertiveness and impulse control and decision making and empathy, even self-regard and, facets of stress tolerance. And all of those individual emotional intelligence competencies are so unique and so different for everybody within your workforce that we have to identify everybody's emotional intelligence competencies, their balances, their imbalances, so that we can clearly say, hey, we're building this foundation of effective impulse control, effective emotional expression and communication, before we can go in and say, okay, now here's some great techniques to apply in order to communicate effectively.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're really putting that, proverbial bullet on our Band-Aid on a bullet wound, kind of thing. And that's what the resilience breakdown becomes.
That makes sense. And I definitely see that, as the outside forces, it's not like we don't want to help companies, but the reality is to make to curate a culture, and to have it long lasting, to make it become resilient, you have to have layers. And what happens usually, you tell me if you think this is true, they'll bring a person in, even us, they'll bring in and they have just one thing they want us to do. And we come in because we have a high belief that we're going to, reinforce and take them to the next level if they do this, and this. But the reality is we're not there, right? We leave and they go on, versus the approach of the multitude that you said. But what happens is, unfortunately, from a business case, if the company does only do one thing, or maybe two or three things that are not intertwined, then all of a sudden it's like, well, nothing works from the outside. And what happens is they just go back and do what they were doing before, because they're like, why spend the money? It's not going to work. And the reality is you didn't spend the money the right way, the strategic way. You didn't build in those layers. You didn't peel back to get to the core. Do you find that to be true as well? That's what's happening? Yeah. Absolutely. And it makes me sad. It makes me sad when the first thing that goes when retention's going down and turnover's going up is the first thing that goes is less training, less focus on engagement. And I'm like, wait, what? Isn't that counterintuitive? Aren't you, throwing gasoline on the fire? We're no longer band-aiding it. We're literally ripping it off and throwing gasoline on that. Is there the most common, or from a strategic standpoint, of the assessments that you have and you do, and of course I'm visualizing the will that you have, but is there a common place that if you can only do one thing every 6 months or one thing a year, is there a common place from an emotional intelligence that is the starting place? I mean, what is it? Because everybody can't go in with, big budgets, but where should they start if they've done nothing?
Yeah, if they've done nothing. So, the reality is the starting place is nothing more than integrating a fundamentals of emotional intelligence, overview, so that everybody understands what it really is, because there is a clear misconception about what emotional intelligence is and what it is not. And I think, that just being able to clearly articulate and have a common understanding within an organization of what emotional intelligence is and what it's not, and the value added in terms of both individual and organizational resilience and effectiveness is, I think, is very important. And, in saying that, we have this misconception that emotional intelligence is about our emotions per se, right? It's about, our constant feelings and how much we laugh. I mean, it's not about our emotions per se, or how much we laugh, or how much we cry, or how much we care if you laugh or if I cry. Emotional intelligence is about our ability to truly manage, identify, and then employ the emotional information that we are receiving from ourselves, from others, and the world around us. Being that when we can manage those cues, that emotional information appropriately and effectively and efficiently, we have the opportunity to create so much synergy in terms of the time and resources that we put into reaching an optimal outcome from situation to situation as those dynamics change instantly. As we're dealing with ourselves, we're dealing with one person, we're dealing with a new person, we're dealing with a group of people, and then how that leads into transformational leadership. and the influence, that ability to really influence a large group of people and persuade people to reach a common goal with a very positive underlying motive.
The other thing that I don't know if everybody knows, if viewers know, is emotional intelligence is something that you're starting here that you can continually level up. You can learn it.
Yeah,
This is something that you can, and I don't think everybody, realizes that as well. Unlike behavioral traits, personality traits, the emotional intelligence can be learned, and we should always want to achieve that at a higher level.
Yeah, Shelley, that's a really good point. So one of the examples that I'll use in new groups of individuals is to, really ask them if they understood that EI can in fact be developed, and not only can it be objectively measured, like you were talking about in the assessments, but it can be developed, which is very unique compared to some of our other intelligences and behavioral traits, to include our IQ.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really realize, and we don't really think about the notion that our IQ plateaus, the research shows us somewhere between the age of 25 to 27. And so I'll ask individuals, I'll say, well, how many of you out there right now that are listening to Shelley and I are over the age of, let's just say, 27? Right. And I'm going to imagine that there's a large population that's over the age of 27. So my question to you is, what has changed since you were 27? Right. I mean, has your ability to effectively communicate and manage relationships and resolve conflict and tolerate stress and, make strategic decisions, has that changed since you were 27? And the majority of everybody says yes. And the idea is that we're hoping that it's changed in a positive way as opposed to. But the other idea is, well, if your IQ hasn't changed, how have all of your experiences changed you, and what has changed? Well, the reality is, whether you realize it or not, you have inadvertently, without even being cognizant of it, you've been evolving your emotional intelligence. Yeah. You've been evolving your ability to balance your assertiveness and your impulse control and your empathy and all of those other competencies that fall within emotional intelligence.
And we call it, maturity oftentimes. Right. And it's really that attunement. And it's also that ability that all of a sudden the things that we let go as we mature, it's because we can't fight every little thing as we did when we were younger. And you're right, people don't assimilate that really that's the emotional intelligence that you've learned over the years kicking in, and great feedback that hopefully you've been given, because I've also met quite a few that are senior leaders that have not evolved very well in their emotional intelligence. And I'm sure the viewers can immediately think of a few people in that as well. So we are going to have to sadly bring this to a close. And so I didn't realize that I was drinking out of my Superwoman thing, but Sarah is a superwoman for sure, and I hope you guys see that too. But Sarah, thank you for coming on today. Are there any closing thoughts, tips, maybe something people should read, I don't know, that you want to share? And then also, please give everybody the best way to get in contact with you, and of course I will type it at the bottom as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shelley. And I do very much appreciate your time and the viewers' time today. So I'd like to do a takeaway tip. And I'm going to tie it back to your comment about senior leaders that you've seen who don't appear to have evolved emotionally in terms of emotional intelligence as much as we would hope them to. The research really shows us that, the more senior you become within an organization in terms of organizational structure, the lower the more your EI begins to plateau for various reasons, whether it be that dislocation from, that boots on the ground perspective and more of the strategic external viewpoint. However, that's what the science and the statistics are showing us. And so from a leadership perspective, one of the best things that you can do, of course, as you learn to evolve your own emotional intelligence, is to create what we call positive behavior contagions within your organization. And, a contagion in and of itself, something contagious, is something that spreads. Well, a positive behavior contagion is something that is going to spread that positive ripple effect through your organization from an indirect standpoint. And when we talk about EI, one of the best things you can do as a leader is to provide emotionally intelligent feedback to whether it be your peers, your colleagues, your direct support reports, And here's an example of what I mean by this. let's say that you had an individual who you would ask them to turn in a report and you needed it done by tomorrow, okay? And you came to them this morning and said, you know what? We just got word, we got to push up our submission, and I need that report done by the end of today. And they get it done for you. They get it done, and they turn in a very comprehensive report in time, shifts, they flex, they adapted, they managed all that stress. Your ability to respond to them when they get that back to you with emotionally intelligent feedback by using terms like, hey, I really appreciate your ability to flex and manage the stress that we threw on you at the last minute. That was really solid, and this is how it impacted the organization. And simply by using emotionally intelligent words like the competencies that we find in the emotional quotient, such as flexibility, stress tolerance, impulse control, assertiveness, those types of words, what you're ultimately doing is you're teaching the organization, the folks within your organization, that what you want to see is emotionally intelligent behavior.
Yeah.
And you don't have to teach them EI. You're indirectly doing it by just
living it.
That emotionally intelligent feedback. And that can create that positive behavior contagion and really start to build EI within your workforce without even, taking the time and the resources to fully inundate them in a formal training course.
What I loved about that, or my takeaway hearing that, is the reinforcing the positive things, so having those affirmations, positivity, but telling them how it impacted it. I like that combination together, because so many times, people may say, and they may even be saying it now, well, I tell people that I appreciate them and I thank them and I give them a pat on the back. But I think that recipe, the combination that creates the contagion, is when you say, I appreciate you did this because it impacted that. Because it connects the why, and we all know the more that we know why we're doing something, especially if it's something that we buy into and we're passionate about, and then all of a sudden we're going to do it more often, not just because of the appreciation, but because of the results. So I love that combination together. So Sarah, how can everybody best get in contact with you?
Yes, absolutely. So you can either go to the website, which is www.vitruvian.com, EI as in emotional intelligence.com. And the email address that I can be reached at is Sarah, SARAH .Spradlin, SPRADLIN at Vitruvian, VITRUVIAN, EI for emotional intelligence.com.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time today. And everybody, stay tuned for another Culture Hour episode that's coming to you soon. And if you like these episodes, please do a couple things. Comment when you watch them, share them, or maybe more than a couple things. Comment, share them. But if you've got somebody that you think would be a great somebody that I should have on, just tag me. You can find me all over the social networks. And you can put comments in the notes and respond, or send me an email with your questions as well. So until then, remember, culture matters. And oh, by the way, Elizabeth Veliz is the one who got me this Wonder Woman glass. I just realized that. I'm like, who did I? That was like squirrel. Anyways, everybody have a great day. Until next time, culture matters. Bye.